So in studio today, we've got Eunice Halstead. She's the owner of Insurance Risk Specialist, and she's our insurance expert contributor here on the Consumer Quarterback Show. Attorney Jason Kobal as well. He's our legal analyst and talking about workers' comp, personal injury law, consumer debt. So, Jason, back to you. Personal injury law. What are you seeing in that space? You know, I think about slip and falls. I think about car accidents, different types of, we've even talked in the show about, nightclubs where fights happen in the parking lot and there's no security to break them up, and, all types of scenarios that play out in the real world.
Right. I actually, recently I got a very serious case, and I won't mention names or anything, but it was a kid. He was just leaving worked the night shift, got hit by a school bus.
Whoa.
As a pedestrian crossing. Very horrific accident. But being that it's a school bus, that's sovereign immunity. Anytime that you're going after municipality, yeah, you're capped.
Wow.
So it's a miracle that he actually lived, but still lots of damages, multiple fractures, and the limit for sovereign immunity is $200,000. So
wow.
it really makes it. You're going to get the max because the damages far exceed the most you can possibly get, but it's a bad situation to be in because,
How was he looking down at his phone? I mean, was he at fault or was the school bus driver?
No, the driver actually ran a red light.
Oh, man.
Not to get into too many details, but
that's crazy.
And it's, talking to my client about it was just, I can't imagine,
$200,000 for the rest of your life if you're
it's not enough.
Damaged, if you're not whole, that's wow.
It's awful. But you do the best you can to get the medical bills practically dropped completely, and they'll reduce. They understand. You explain the situation, but definitely a horrible situation, and it goes to show it's really not so much the type of injury or the damage is more so about how much insurance is there on each particular case.
Right. So let's bring Eunice back into that as well. So when you think about these coverages that some, maybe municipalities or maybe even private business owners they'll have at their locations, are you seeing what are the limits on some of those policies, or what are you seeing in that space?
Well, you should always at least have $1 million worth of coverage, and it is always recommendable to have an umbrella policy in case you have a large accident or a negligent act that exceeds the if you go to court and they award more than $1 million, then you may have a problem if you don't have an umbrella policy.
Right. So the umbrella policy is what exactly?
It sits on top of your general liability and your automobile policy, or including if you have a watercraft, it would sit on top of your watercraft, or if you have an aircraft, it would sit on top of your aircraft policy. So all those limits would pay first, and the umbrella would go above any damage that would be over the maximum limit that those coverage would have.
Is that kind of like, on a different note here with the E&O policy, so errors and omissions for a real estate or insurance company, some type of a professional company, that maybe they overlooked a certain form they were supposed to have in a file?
That's professional liability. That's a separate category. The directors and officers or the errors and omissions policies are usually handled separately. They're not your mainstream because they're specialized for, like, for example, lawyers would have a professional liability policy. I, as an insurance professional, and I'm licensed, have a professional liability policy.
Yep.
Umbrellas do sometimes cover over professional liability policies also, but you have to make sure that the carrier that you have the umbrella with actually will cover above that type of policy. Right.
Yeah, so it's important to consider. These are considerations that you need to think about. You got to think that layer deeper, and make sure your policies are updated. We talked about that review opportunity that we have as well. All right, so let's switch gears. So we talked a little personal injury. Let's talk about consumer debt. We know that Americans, I think it was something like 5 or 6 years ago, we went from having at least a positive, back a couple generations ago, it used to be about a 10% savings rate in America. And then I remember it was, just several years back, we actually went into the negative savings. So we talk about student loan debt, record amounts of student loan debt out there, trillions of dollars of debt. We talk about consumer debt, mortgage debt. We know that people are in debt in America. So with the consumer debt space, what are you seeing playing out there? What are the considerations?
It's funny. I actually got into that through my workers' comp business, because in workers' comp, you're not allowed to bill the injured worker. And it was happening to my clients all the time. and a case came out in comp court that says I don't have standing to bring it in comp court when one of my clients gets a bill. I'm like, well, what the heck's going on here? So I discovered the the Florida Consumer Collections Practices Act is the state statute, and then the Fair Debt Collections Practices Act is the federal statute.
Okay.
For if someone bills you and it's an illegitimate bill, and I sue the providers that bill my clients with that statute. And then also I learned the FCRA, the Fair Credit Reporting Act, that as far as on your credit reports, you know, your credit rating is so important to everything. You're applying for a job, buying a house, whatever it is.
Yeah,
it's
a lot
critical.
of things.
They have to be 100% correct, and most of them aren't. I would say maybe 60% of the credit reports I look at has a mistake that I could actually take action on and file suit.
Yeah.
So that's what I've been doing.
Yeah. I remember one of the credit experts we had on the show several years ago, he made a claim that 100% of credit reports out there, he can find at least one thing wrong.
I believe that. I believe that.
I mean,
I was being generous saying 60%.
Yeah,
but
I
I believe that.
Yeah, but it's, when you think about it,
I
because
definitely
there's
agree.
so many people like playing that game of buying credit card debt, selling it to the next guy. The next guy doesn't verify. He just starts trying to collect on it, hooking them up to the auto dialers, boom.
And I'll be honest with you. I've even had success getting things that are valid taken off credit reports because you are entitled to. A lot of people don't realize this. You could force them to prove that they are the owner of that debt, and they have to do it within 30 days. And if they don't, that's a violation of your rights.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's just not enough time to respond, and they don't get it done even when it is valid. So there's a lot of little nuggets there for people.
Called a validation of debt, I believe,
Correct.
right?
Yep.
So they got to file that validation of debt, verification of debt, and if they don't, they legally have to remove it.
Yeah, and they violated your rights under FCRA, and you give me a call.
Wow, there you go. So those are things to consider. Those are things to look for in the consumer debt space, and there's a lot of consumer debt out there.
So one interesting thing, I'm sure most people don't request their credit reports and read through all of them to see. Many times the addresses in the past are incorrect or jumbled or whatever. One issue I had a while ago was that when you intercommingle funds with somebody else, like my ex-husband, they continue to appear on your credit report. And when he got remarried and they bought another house, it started appearing on my credit report. So that kind of thing you need to take action on, because if they stop paying their mortgage, it may affect you.
And that can hurt.
Come on, man.
That can hurt right there to get those situations that come in.